trying to come up with the stuff that's actually sort of more broadly applicable, right? The kind of thing where you would find dozens or hundreds of job openings for, as opposed to half a dozen really, really, really cool ones, you know. But noted, Elijah. I'll make sure that I keep going on the tech part, because I actually think that stuff is pretty useful to know, like, where are you aiming for, right? It's not that you can go right from this class to that job, but it does give you career path thinking. What else?
Dozens and hundreds is good.
I have a question for Sam and the faculty. I mean, how does the cloud, AWS containers, all of that, how does that get integrated into your curriculum, or should we bring in someone, an AWS person?
Sure, that would be great. I'm moving everything to the cloud.
Yeah.
Like that guy he had with all his hacking AWS, that was great.
Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like that didn't nerd you out.
Oh, it was fine for some of the students. There's a lot of students at all different levels.
Right.
Some of them want to see the highly technical ones. Some of them want to see the administrative ones. I don't think you can go wrong. They just want to see examples of jobs. And in reality, of course, they'll take whatever's available, which will be totally different than everything they've seen.
That raises an interesting idea. I wonder if it would be possible for, like, for example, if I was to bring one of the people that does audit and compliance stuff, so that would be less hardcore nerd, along with one of the engineers that does it, right?
I would really like to see that, because
right,
I have a lot of students heading for jobs like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of them would like for example, like, I may not know how to actually go build it myself, but I do know how to go run through the checklist of what's your audit require and what does the PCI standards require and that kind of stuff. So having both at the same time for, like, the standard says you have to do X. Now here's how you would actually set that up, right? That would be an interesting way to compare these two things.
Sure, that would be fine. I see some Tim Ryan has put some questions in a post about FireEye jobs in the chat.
Yeah, just quickly asking if it's possible to comment on those positions a little bit. They look very interesting, especially since they're entry level. Those are obviously appealing to our students. And then, to follow up on what Olivia said, anything that can kind of combine the different technologies in a guest speaker is very useful, because otherwise our students have to take a whole series of classes about AWS, for example, or they have to take a whole series of classes about containers, and so, those things aren't always practical to get a little bit of, to get knowledge, in a short period of time. So guest speakers that can touch on multiple subjects, I think are very helpful for us.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that I'm bringing absolutely can do that one. From the speaking side of it, like, one of the things that was kind of eye-opening when we did the one with Sergio, we're talking about how to establish persistence in CI/CD pipelines and using Lambda functions, and somebody had asked, what's Lambda, right? And from our side, you go like, okay, that's kind of the background knowledge of what's going on in Amazon stuff, but it does totally raise the question of, okay, what would be the crash course in the sorts of things in Amazon that people probably should know, right? So 10 years ago, that would have been, all right, Windows, Linux, Cisco, Checkpoint, that kind of stuff. And you go, well, if 65% of the enterprise spend is moving to the cloud, what is it now, right? What's sort of the functional equivalent? What's a security rule in Amazon look like? How is it different than a Checkpoint firewall rule, for example, right? On those jobs, none of those are actually in my org. Those are all in the consulting org, so I don't actually have anything I can say about them, but I love that people are doing queries off of that. That's good stuff. And actually, I would say go apply, like, literally just go apply. The second one listed there, one of them is an associate security consultant, the other one's an internship. They're doing the internships at most companies, by the way. Right now, I have 4 interns in my org, but they're all in Virginia. 3 of the 4 have already been filled, and I have the 4th offer already out. So we're talking about a job that doesn't actually start until June, but the offers have already been made. That's the way interns go. So there's nothing wrong with you trying to apply now for a job that you may still have another semester of classes before you go to it, what other kinds of things that are
Other
interesting? I
areas.
can't help on things like there was a whole there's the computer side of things, like truly just computers, like literally how would you build the operating systems, or how would you do the routing and that kind of stuff. That's a little bit less pure cybersecurity and a little bit more just IT in general. Doesn't mean I can't find someone for that, but I don't know whether that's what's needed here. I personally think cyber is way cooler than just standard IT, but
Anything else? I mean, other thoughts about the types of talks you'd like to see or jobs you'd like to hear about?
you have access to the chief security officer at FireEye right now. I suggest you talk, because if you can come off mute and talk to me, that's going to make you that much better in an interview. And that's just the truth. Sam, I agree with that one. You're gonna apply a lot of places. That's whether you get any one job is almost immaterial. It's just the way it goes.
What would you say is like the breadth of what all you do at FireEye? Like you have Sergio on AWS cloud computing. You have like, what are all the what would you say is really like your range of interests, I guess?
All right. So are you talking about like in my org as a chief security officer org, or are you talking about the company as in the products that we deliver?
You said the products that you order?
Product we deliver. So
deliver. I would say products that you deliver.
Okay. So what we do is 6 years ago, we were 100% appliances that got sold into data centers, right?
Yep.
That's now maybe 45% of our business. All the rest of it is cloud-based, like cloud-based email protection or delivering endpoint protection agents that you would install on your Mac or your PC, that kind of stuff. There's a big part of our company that's pure security consulting, like breach response, red teaming, some assessments, and some it's called strategic consulting. Kind of like think about me, but as a consultant, right? There's also another couple of hundred people that do intelligence, just open source, unclassified intelligence. It's really, really cool. It is. It's also the kind of thing that we tend to hire former military and former agency people for. An awful lot of those jobs are centralized in Virginia, but not all of them. It's just that one doesn't really have entry-level positions into it, An entry-level version of that, however, would be, you can imagine working for like a multinational corporation or a big bank or something, where it would be, at this bank, how do I use the intelligence that we have access to? Which could be the intel they buy from us, or it could be what comes from the FSI SAC. It could be open source stuff you get from VirusTotal. It could be, right? There's a huge amount of intelligence that you can get into. And the intelligence role in that case, corporately, would be, how do I use it? How do I plug it into our tools? How do I create detections or hunt cases out of it, right? Just because I don't have as many entry-level jobs on that side doesn't mean there aren't still entry-level jobs in intelligence. Okay. We have the whole just pure engineering side of things, like literally the people that write the code that goes on the appliances or goes into that endpoint product, that kind of stuff. And then, God, I don't even know the numbers anymore. We're about 3,100 employees roughly. Call it 500 or 600 of them are in the sales side. The engineering side of that would be, it's sales engineer is actually the name of the role. And there's a lot of those. There really are. And quite honestly, they get paid really well. It does mean, however, that you have to think like a salesperson and be the engineering side of that. You will find
there's been some interest in those roles.
But
yeah, and so I've had a couple of people approach me about, do any of the colleges prepare people to go into either technical sales or sales engineering? Would you still have to have a background like this, or I mean,
you would? So for a sales engineer role, you need this background way more than you need a sales background. The sales background off of that is that you would have to realize that the job you're doing is like you would do Like you'd be the person to give the demo of the product, whereas you would be assigned to a sales like account manager. That person would be the one to go find customers and arrange meetings and get people to show up to the meeting, where the sales engineer would be the one who does the demo to
Okay.
talk them through how would this actually work, what would you plug into it, what are the technical requirements, all that kind of stuff. The sales engineering roles, I will say that in general, they pay better than a pure technical role. However, they're variable compensation, which means you might have 40% of your job that's tied into the commission check of the salespeople that you're connected to, right? On a good year, you can kill it. On a bad year, it really sucks. And it depends on where you work, how the product's doing in the market, how good your account reps are doing, all the rest of that kind of stuff. The people I know that love being sales engineers, they love doing it. The people that I know that, like me, I would never, ever, never do a sales engineer job. I'd rather boil myself to death than have to take an NC job. But that's just because I don't like selling, right? I would hate that part of the job, even though I would be really good at the demos. That's just not what makes me get up in the morning, you know? Somebody had asked, there's a couple of questions in chat, so I want to hit these ones real fast. Do we offer an apprenticeship program? Not directly, no. That's generally the kind of thing that you would get at a bigger company, right? So like, I imagine Google or Facebook or Twitter, the kind of place that has tens of thousands of employees. We only have 3,000 and we're spread all over the world for our 3,000. In the Bay Area, we only have maybe 400 people. Right, I mean, like we really are spread out all around the world. Whereas you get like a Facebook, and they've got tens of thousands of people in the Bay Area, right? It's just it's a different kind of a job market at that kind of point. A lot of the ex-military, good actually. The funny part is that that most of the places that would want to hire an ex-military, that actually is a job benefit for you being ex-military. There's some funny ways that they teach you how to think a little differently when you go through the military. Like you get assigned to a role and you understand that I have to do my job, right? Whereas somebody that hasn't been military may not always believe that they're the one that has to do it. They might end up being like, okay, I'll do what I try and then I'll hand it to someone else, right? So the places that tend to hire more ex-military, like us, actually, we have a lot of ex-military. We actually are really proud of all the military people that we've had in ours. We had, I don't know, dozens, if not hundreds, when we were talking Veterans Day a couple months ago, you know. How important is it to have an AS or a BS degree? That's a fantastic question. And by the way, it's separate from the major. At some places, like with me in my org, I don't care at all. I really don't. I am way more interested about whether or not you actually have set up a lab in Amazon and have hooked up free Splunk and a free Bro sensor and a free Splunk sensor. That's massively more interesting to me than whether or not you have a degree. However, you got to get through a recruiter to get to me. And the recruiters tend to have more old school ideas about what's required. Now, there's a caveat to that, in that when you get higher up in a job ladder, it becomes non-negotiable. It's really, really difficult to get a promotion to senior manager or director without having a bachelor's degree. Having said that, when you're in basically any of the jobs we're talking about, they would probably pay for your school, or at least part of it. There's a relatively standard IRS deduction that companies get to take. I think it's $5,250 right now, like $5,200 a year, which doesn't actually pay for a whole lot of classes, especially not at like a tier 1 school, but who cares at that point, right? You could get an online bachelor's and be perfectly fine with sort of satisfying the requirement. The master's program that I'm at is stupidly above $5,000 a year, and the company's not paying any more than $5,200 a year for it. So that's all on me. But the second part about which major, this is probably, the instructors may not like this. It doesn't matter that much. So the woman that I want to have come here as soon as she's on a lot of the Amazon work right now, she has a biology degree. The major just truly doesn't make as much of a difference, except for your first couple of jobs. Like when you're going from, I took these classes, to therefore you should hire me for a job, from that job to your next one, they're really going to be saying, what did you do at your first job? And then what's your career look like? What do your multiple jobs involve? You know, a couple of years out of school, nobody really cares which classes you took. Your GPA maybe briefly in an interview, right? But you get these kinds of classes in order to get your foothold into a career. Then it's on you to earn the rest of your career. The good part about tech in general and cybersecurity specifically, it's a meritocracy. If you're the one who's working your ass off and you're the one producing results, you will be the one promoted, period. That's like not even a question, period. That's just the way it goes. Then you got to figure out how to navigate up a job ladder at that point, but that's a separate kind of a conversation. Last part on that one, it says AS or BS degree. I don't personally know if it makes a difference between an AA or an AS. It's more along the lines of 2-year degree or 4-year degree. I'm sure that there are places where it would make a difference what exactly your degree was in. I have seen many job postings where they'll say like, 4-year degree, preferably in computer science, right? So in those kinds of things, those kinds of employers, it would make more of a difference. I would also say that you have to be able to make it through a tech interview, no matter what degree you've got, right? So just because you had the perfect degree for the job, if you can't do the delivery on being able to explain exactly how you would do what you've said you've done, they wouldn't hire you, right? Many of the tech jobs, they literally will say, sit you in front of a computer and say, okay, here's your task. Let's see if you can do these things. In those situations, do the freaking interview. Seriously, like show up. Even if you don't get hired for that job, you're going to be way better prepared for your next interview. Show up and do it. The thing I will tell you about I don't know how far out on the limb I'm supposed to go here. A lot of the people that you will work with never once considered whether or not they were qualified for a job, right? Daddy's always told them they were qualified, so they applied. You have to, imposter syndrome is real everywhere, but the neighborhood I grew up in, we all thought people that had money had some magical thing we didn't have. No, it turns out they're the ones that had resumes and they actually applied for internships. I mean, like it's literally that simple. Just sort of trying to get out there makes a big difference. What makes me get up in the morning? That's a fantastic question. I have the best job on the planet. Cybersecurity is always changing, always. So if you were a networking guy, and the people that I know that have done networking have done it for a very long time in general. In general, Cisco switching and routing is mostly the same now compared to what it was 15 or 20 years ago. There's new versions of it. There's new, Nexus switches versus, older stuff, et cetera. But the core is basically the same. In cybersecurity, that's got some of it that's way. Like the way you would architect systems, that's true. But think of it this way, ransomware. We all talk about ransomware now. That didn't even exist 3 years ago. There was no big ransomware cases. I think it's about 3 years ago. I'd have to look it up now, right? But that sort of doesn't happen in other areas. That's part of the reason why the cloud is so disruptive, because they used to talk like Windows Server versus Linux Server, or Ubuntu versus CentOS or whatever, right? Those are small shifts compared to on-prem versus cloud, right? Cybersecurity, we do those kinds of shifts all the time. You're going to go from having to deal with network level, think packet analysis kind of detections, down to how do you architect the data structures to go into Salesforce. It's a completely different conversation. And nobody actually expects you to be the best engineer on all technologies. But one of the secret sauces we have, which is part of the reason why I think students do so well here, we know how to look up answers, right? Googling is actually a huge skill for cybersecurity. So when you're having the conversation with that same network guy who goes like, oh, that's not how it goes, and you're literally banging away on your Google search right there live on that call, and you're like, well, I just found the hardening standard for the document we're saying for the technology you just said was impossible. Is that not the starting point? It's shocking how common I've done that over my last 10 or 15 years. You can imagine that being really, really useful for somebody that had the motivation to go back to school. right? I mean, that's just the way that those things tie together versus somebody who's, I've done Cisco switching and routing for 15 years. I don't want the person that thinks in exactly the same way. I want the person that can find the new answer now based on a threat profile, the attackers, that kind of stuff. What's the Wikipedia link? Sorry, I don't typically click links in Zoom calls. Michael Souza put it in there. Well, I'm not even sure. Oh, yeah, he's still there. Michael, come off mute. Tell me what it is you put in there. Gilman Louis, what's that?
Michael.
He's typing.
Oh, a guest possibility.
Got it. Sam, your thing there about strongly prefer to not let any of my clients hold me back. I'm responsible for my own progress. Absolutely. Don't forget though that if you work for a place that has a tuition reimbursement, take advantage of it. Seriously, take advantage of it. That's how I got my first master's degree. Was my boss had gone over to Golden Gate University in San Francisco, found out they had a master's degree in digital security and brought me a brochure. She's like, you know, the company would pay for part of that. And I was like 35 years old, and I was like, well, hell, I can do anything for 2 years. So I got my first master's degree, and that absolutely did. There's a straight line from that, me getting that master's degree to me becoming a director, right? It sort of changes the way you think at that point. Oh, guest possibility. Okay.
I got it. I wrote it down.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not guaranteeing that I can find people I don't know. It's more along the lines of like, if you guys were to say, what you really wanted to do was to talk to somebody that's good at identity and access management or Active Directory security, or, you know, like we talked about the cloud stuff or whatever, right? I've been trying to find somebody actually that I would like to bring in for software security groups, because it's not necessarily, do you know how to write code better than anyone? It's, do you know how to do threat modeling? Do you know how to run the program around that? There's all kinds of other stuff where security thinking is a little different than ability to write C code, right? And when you take a security thinking person and apply it to a large group of people that just write C code, they don't think of themselves in general as security people. They generally think of themselves as a C developer, right? And you're like, okay, so we need people who think through, BSIM is the one I'm thinking, I'll type that in there. bsim.org or microsoft.com, I'll type that one too. /SDL for their security development lifecycle. Like those whole things, like at Microsoft when I worked there, the people that did the threat modeling for the features that they were writing code for, it was not the hardcore software developers that did the threat modeling, it was the project managers. Because they needed people to think through the process. They were doing a stride methodology. There was a very structured way of thinking through it. And they might have to ask some questions to the people writing the code. But what it got down to was, what's the new features we're building? How could I exploit it? What are the mitigations I have? Now what's left? And then you go like, is this acceptable or not? And if not, go build me more mitigations or change what you're going to build. That thinking, that's technical, like security thinking, but it's not the same thing as I could write the code for this new module in Windows, for example. Yeah, thanks, Sam. BSIM is about as universal as it comes for that, by the way. It's open source, been around for years. And like if you could talk your way through understanding the BSIM stuff, you would actually have a chance of getting an entry-level job, like on one of those, like in a software security group. Somebody to say, I know all of the concepts. I don't know how to write the code, but I do know all the concepts, and I'm a smart guy who knows how to do research, right? Smart person. It's not actually gendered, but yeah, sorry, Michael, I'm not going to get you a French person that was born in 1939. There's no way that I'm going to get that person to come talk here. So. Give me a feeling for, so you guys take these classes, how many of them are and maybe I might even, I might actually be asking Sam this. How many of the classes are taken by everyone versus they're more elective and sort of specific to each person's journey?
They're pretty much all elective and people take whatever they want.
Okay.
There's only small parts of it that have any order. Like if you want to be on the red team, then there's a series of 3 hacking classes, but the rest are pretty much all just one-offs on special topics, and you could take
Okay.
them at random.
The thing that I will tell you, so entry-level IT, the job is you get a help desk job. You're the person that helps, build the laptops for a company. Entry-level security, sometimes you did that first, sometimes you don't, but it gets down to, can you understand the events coming out of security technologies? Can you understand what the Splunk alert is for your Windows logs? Or can you deal with a semantic antivirus alert? Or do you know what that the snort sensor or the bro sensor is even talking about when it comes to the detections coming out of there? I will tell you that those things are kind of hard to set up in your own lab because you don't have corporate traffic, right? You can't like you could plug in a snort sensor and you could put like default rules in the thing, but they're never going to trip unless you have people surfing past the thing, right? And if you go trip your own sensor, you know exactly what you were doing, so that's not the same thing, right? Now, having said all of that, that is way the hell better than somebody says, I just finished my classes, give me a job. Right? Because at least you would know what the alerts look like. You would at least understand there's low, medium, high critical alerts, right? You'd be able to know that if you were to have a free instance of Splunk set up, running your logs past it, you could plug intelligence into there, and you could create something in an Amazon instance. Like, for example, if you were to create an instance in Amazon, put a Windows VM in there, take the operating system logs of that into a free setup of Splunk. Then open RDP on that remote desktop protocol to the internet. And it'll be like a few dozen minutes before people try to hack that box. That's literally what's going to happen, right? You're like, all right, get those logs. Actually be able to know that somebody just tried to log into my box from the internet on RDP ports. That's like, it's that simple, right? So you're not promising that you know how to architect that Windows box perfectly. You are saying that I'm self-started enough that I could come up with this on my own, and I could actually find that log in a Windows event log. You're going like, so all I need to know is what are the other things that we're looking up? You just got through 80% of your interview just off of that. I literally just gave you the lab scenario for you to be able to say, I could get a job on a second shift SOC for anybody in the Bay Area, anybody. Sam, make that a homework problem for him. It is awesome. Can I obtain a sample of corporate traffic capture to play with? Absolutely not. Nobody on the planet would give you that one. You might be able to get, by the way, there are data sets that you can get out there. I'd have to look up the website because I don't remember it. I took a machine learning class as part of my master's, and there are like data sets out there for you to go build machine learning models against. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I mean, like one of them was, it said that it was logon data with password information. And literally the only thing it had was a logon name and the number of digits in the password. And that was it. It wasn't, being able to sample which passwords are good or bad or anything. And that's about how anonymized the data sets are out there. Yeah, Sam, I'm sure that there's data sets out there. No company on the planet would ever give you recorded packet captures off of that stuff, just because you would have the packet capture of people logging in, you would have the packet capture of their email, that kind of stuff. There's just way too much sensitive information for you to ever get a real version of that. You could, however, if you had Wireshark up running on your network, whether it was local or in a cloud, and then you go surf anywhere, go to Google, see what that looks like on the wire. You don't have to be perfect at it, but if you could at least say, I know how to search in Wireshark to find google.com, yeah, that's actually pretty useful, right? You're just opening up possibilities that you could do in a discussion. So when they ask you, do you know how to read a packet capture? You're going to go, well, I know what a PCAP format is, and I know how to find what I'm looking for. However, I may not have all the context as to what I would specifically be looking at, which is fine because you're going to have billions or trillions of packets. You're not manually looking at them anyways. What you would get is, here's the PCAP that tripped that detection, right? And you're like, okay, read the description of that detection. What is it talking about? Oh, this one is looking for evil RDP sessions. Okay, I can see in the PCAP, here's where the RDP on this port happened, right? And you can just sort of do that kind of correlation. You don't have to be great at it. You have to have any clue at all what you're talking about, right? For speakers and categories of speakers, not individual human beings. Sorry, Michael. But like if you had, if you literally could say, I want someone that does blah, that actually is what would help me the most. That's why I'm arranging to try to get somebody here that literally they have job openings for multi-company internships. I want that person to come talk to you about how to get an internship job, right?
And this, I got to say too, this is an opportunity for all of you because the word is getting out about these tech talks, and we're getting some requests to do some things other than information security. And so if we can front load, if we can front load the spring semester with as much InfoSec, we can do it now.
Yeah, actually, Michael, that's a good idea. Splunk Users is a great idea.
Yeah.
My company doesn't use Splunk; they're a competitor of ours. So I don't have anybody on my staff that would be great at that one. However, I can probably try to find somebody. One of the people that I do want to have come is a woman that used to run my my GRC group. She was the one that ran my compliance and audit, and she works at Splunk now. So she may very well be able to find someone that I just don't personally know. So I want to have her here to talk to you about audits and compliance and like third-party risk programs and all that kind of stuff, because there's a ton of jobs there. And then we'll find out if we can get people from there. Actually, I gotta tell you, if you had to choose one SIM to play with, do Splunk. It's right now the industry standard one. There's a bunch of other ones you can do that I don't know whether you can get free versions of. Kibana does stuff, you know, Sumo Logic does stuff. There's a lot of different logging systems. There's even people that just dump their logs into straight into S3 buckets and make their own elk stack stuff. But third-party risk, that's a great question, like a really, really good question. So GRC groups in general, governance, risk, and compliance. Risk is the part where you say like, okay, like, how are we built? What's the chance of me being attacked in the next year? About 100%. What's the risk of me losing customer data in the next year? Well, that's way smaller. Well, how do you quantify that? That's risk, okay? Compliance is the bigger part of that one, which is the whole, like, can I pass a SOC 2 audit? I'll put a couple of those things here. To type 1 or 2, you can look those ones up. PCI audits are literally every single company on the planet that accepts credit cards has to pass a PCI audit. ISO 27001 or 27002. There's also ISO standards for risk management. There's ISO standards for software security. There's ISO standards for a lot of things. The kind of stuff that I would think about, it depends on what sort of a company you work for. Like, for example, if you worked for PG&E, they have nuclear power plants, so they would have to be compliant with NERC requirements, right? If you were working at Google on their FedRAMP environment, FedRAMP is a certification you need to have in order to sell any cloud service to the government. Those are onerous requirements. Now, the third-party risk we're talking about, third-party risk is if I'm gonna hire a company or buy a service from a company and trust them with my data. Well, if they lost my data, I'm getting sued, and maybe I could sue them also. But you can't just say, oh, it's not my fault they lost it because I gave it to them, right? So what's a good example of this one? The funny part is the Equifax one, I never had a relationship with Equifax, but they got hacked, right? That's actually first party. They were the one who lost it themselves. Third party would be like, there's the reason why I'm having to think through this one is I try to not use company names that have a chance of us having worked for them, because I don't know who we work for.
What about the target that came from a third party that got into the?
Yeah, it's actually, that's a good example because there's a lot of public information on that one. So Target, the way the attackers got in was through the HVAC consultant, right? So Target hired the consultant who installed some stuff, and they hacked in through that company to then get into Target to steal the credit card numbers from Target. The banks all sued Target. They didn't sue the small little heating and air conditioning company. They sued Target, right? So when you're a massive Target and a massive checkbook like Target is, Target the company, how do you make sure the people you're hiring are not your third-party risk, right? Does that make sense? Big companies hire a lot of people to do this. Think of it as a very, very procedural kind of a almost checklist. Let's say like, okay, how do you store your passwords? Do you do encryption at rest? Do you, true, yes, HVAC ITVO. Do you encryption at rest and encryption in transit? How do you store your encryption keys, et cetera, et cetera? Somebody has to have some kind of awareness of the security industry. What are these terms you're talking about in order to even ask the question to the contractor and whether or not you allow your company to hire them to do a job? That makes sense? So now, if I give my credit card to Target, the shopping company, I don't want to care who they've hired. But if they lost my credit card, my bank's going to sue them, right? Target now has a very large group of people, I'm guessing dozens, if not low hundreds, that do nothing but check third-party risk, right? I know that all the big banks have them also. I know that every major company over, thousands of people, we do with third-party risk. And by the way, the person in charge of my third-party risk program came out of the Merit College program, and I hired him as an intern. I've promoted him 3 times. His name's Joe Harris. He's going to end up talking to you guys at some point. He's absolutely outstanding, and I want more Joe Harrises in the world. Olivia's met him too. You can outsource work, but you can't outsource the responsibility. Absolutely. You also can't outsource the liability. You can't say like, oh, well, I would just sue the HVAC company. No, the banks are going to come after Target for hundreds of millions of dollars. They came, the FTC came after FCC or FTC, I forget which, I think it was FCC, came after Equifax to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And I heard that if they don't keep on their, like, they have to produce an annual report back to the FCC saying, what were they doing to fix their environment so it doesn't happen again? And if they don't hit their plans, they could get like multi-billion-dollar fines. Like theirs was enormous. Kind of good, right? They lost every social security number for every American in the entire country. So.
Well, we've got just a few more minutes left. I want to make sure that we've captured ideas for speakers and topics because we're starting to get started. I'm getting started with fleshing out the spring calendar, and as I mentioned, we have an opportunity to really front load it with InfoSec and cybersecurity and these kind of topics.
We'll fix the calendaring thing because I think you guys will like it. The guy who was going to be here tonight, we had a schedule problem. He's going to be very interesting. So like Elijah, when you were talking about doing like sort of the more technical stuff, he's my director of technology risk and intelligence, and he does a really, really good job of explaining like when they say this attack happened and it was attributed to APT-33 out of Iran. How do we know? Right? And what are the indicators and what is it that we get into and what's the victimology off of it? And how do you know what the motivations of the attackers are? And then also what are the TTPs, tools, techniques, and procedures? Like how do they do their tradecraft, right? Then there's also IOCs, indicators of compromise. Like, think URIs, IP addresses, individual pieces of malware they use, that kind of stuff. There's like all this really cool nerdy stuff. And what it gets down to is he's the person that says, all right, like when you hear that there's some new vulnerability in some tool, from our standpoint, we go like, I don't really care unless there's bad people exploiting that. Well, it's the intelligence that lets you know that one, right? Because something, I don't know, 80 or 90% of the vulnerabilities in the world never, ever have exploit code against them. They don't even have proof of concept code created. So they are real vulnerabilities. They're just not as important until somebody's using them to break into places, right? So yeah, do your monthly patching and yes, get that one done. But if you have known attack patterns happening from actual known bad people, you're doing emergency patching right now. And it's that intelligence that decides, am I upending the way my entire IT org is doing its job? or just doing the normal monthly patching job, right? And Matt does a very good job of that. I'm sorry that we messed up the calendaring on this, but
Definitely screwed that up. I'm sorry.
it happens.
Yeah. You gotta have the meeting on the speaker's calendar, even though you promote it all over the website.
So who else on this call is faculty besides Sam? I don't know everybody's name here.
Hi, Stephen. This is Tim Ryan. I'm an instructor at Foothill College.
Oh, awesome. So is this the first one you've been to, or have you been to any of the other ones?
Yeah, we were at the one with the, sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name, that spoke about the AWS and the pen testing, the red team.
All right.
Yeah.
What I would ask you and Sam both is, like, in class, if you could ask about categories of things you're interested in, right? So I've got enough to fill us up for a couple of months. I'll keep shoving ideas at you guys, I will. The GRC one, I want to have Sharon do it, and also I have somebody that's a PwC consultant, and I want to have them do the presentation at the same time, because internal audit is actually significantly different than external audit. And, like, if you've never looked at audit, how would you even know, right? But ask the students for me, just like, what kinds of things do they think are interesting, and what would be even better is if that was rooted in, like, they spent an hour doing searches for jobs, right? You know, I looked for the word, you know, security intern in the Bay Area, and here's the trends of what I saw. What the hell is this anyways? That would be a pretty useful conversation. But sorry, I'm not going to do Google searching for you guys. You do that.
Well, what we do is a cybersecurity research project. So this is currently the cybersecurity fundamentals class, and 10% of the grade is to do an independent research project. And
Nice.
so hence I give them ideas, but they're really picking their own area of interest at that point, and then pursuing that further. So
Yeah,
we've had things on, 5G, on cloud security. There was a really good one today I read about Microsoft Office 365 and enabling, DKIM and DMARC records and things like that.
perfect.
So they are definitely picking up on things, and the goal is to expose them, at least in the fundamentals class, to a lot of different areas of cybersecurity. It's modeled on the Security Plus certification,
Yeah.
which is pretty broad. And then we just kind of go from there about onto different current areas of interest. Election cybersecurity was very much a topic for discussion in our class last month, and still continuing, by the way.
There's and I'm blanking on whether it's either NIST or MITRE, I forget which, but I did actually see something that was sort of like an ontology of all the different sort of cyber-based careers, right? Like, what are the job codes that would be used there? There were, I don't know, hundreds of them. There were way more than I have ever had in any company I ever worked for. But the sheer breadth of it all was interesting. I may actually see if I can have somebody pull that one up again, just because if we were to put that up there and say, like, okay, here's 200 ideas, 20 of them are really interesting and common, right? I would actually just say that I'm probably not going to spend any time talking about rare little small jobs, right? Those are niche, right? For example, I could bring you somebody that does world-class reverse engineering. You would have to be doing reverse engineering on your own for a decade before you could get a job like he's got, right? I mean, it's just not the way it goes. However, if you were doing that one, then you would be the kind of person that would be researching vulnerabilities and submitting bug bounties everywhere, and your job could literally just be working for yourself, submitting bug bounties and making money. There was a thing I just heard of, maybe this was October. There was a group of 18 to 20-year-olds that submitted dozens of bugs into Apple. They made over $250,000 in bug bounties. And you go, like, wow, that's actually really cool, right? You're like, well, what are the skills you need for that? Some of it's reverse engineering, some of it's just corporate security, some of it's being able to use Metasploit well, right? Now, personally, I wouldn't ever want to live that world just because I like a normal, boring paycheck, right? I wouldn't want to have to work wondering whether or not I was going to get a bug bounty out of it. Some people love that because they can work at 3 a.m. in their boxer shorts and then not work for a week, right? I mean, like, everybody has their own thresholds. We're at 7 o'clock, so even though we screwed up our calendar, I do want to be respectful of your time.
There was one last question, Steve, for you, asking if FireEye ever got involved in sponsoring Capture the Flag or hackathons.
We do. We have The funny part is that I always deal with the ones that are internal. Like we have, we don't do capture the flags very often, partly because it gets really, really risky for us, actually. If we were to set up a scenario, for example, it's highly likely that we worked that scenario for some customer. So even if the person that set up the capture the flag didn't know that we worked for that customer, we can't do those things publicly very often, right? We just end up with people go like, oh my God, why would you do a capture the flag on that scenario? That's like my hack. And we're going like, these two people never even met, right? We do one called Flare, the FireEye Labs, blah, blah, blah. RE is a reverse engineering. So there's Flare on challenge, which they do get into reverse engineering stuff. We don't do as many of those ones as some other groups, just simply because, you know, we do 750 breaches a year for the biggest, ugliest breaches you've ever seen, which means everything we touch always looks like someone else. The other question I've gotten like that that's similar is like phishing scenarios. Do we ever do anything around like what do real common like right now phishing lures look like? They change multiple times a month. But like, for example, internally, when we create fake phishing messages to send to our employees as tests, we're doing that every single day. I test 10% of my employees every single day, 5 days a week, just the way it goes. So twice a month, people get fake phishing messages to see who clicks. We are always basing that on what is it that just recently got caught by real attack groups doing phishing campaigns, right? I've had people that have asked me like, hey, can I get copies of the real attack phishing messages? No, because they were actually sent to some human being. They're somebody's PII, right? But you can read about them all. There's a huge amount of that information out there. We can't author it as much because we actually look at emails, right? See how that one goes?
Thanks, Steve. I tell you, thank you so much. You just really covered for coming in and pinch hitting for my mistake. Again, assuming that everybody has the link. So
I gotta tell you, we're working on some cool stuff, and I'm gonna keep leaning in here. Olivia and I, we were just talking to a board of a different
we have so much
speakers.
going on. Let me tell you.
Right. We have an awful lot that where I'm trying to bring your guys' direction. So stay connected here.
Yeah.
Seriously, stay connected. It will be absolutely worth it. So.
We got some great stuff coming up, and we're just waiting to get all of the pieces together. So stay involved with this, and we'll get Matt Shelton in here. Probably now it'll be the 19th of January. I think you guys all come back from break on the January 18th.
Well, the next one of our speaking things is a week from tomorrow, right?
The 15th? In fact, I had that up earlier.
And that's going to be Anna and Doc. That's going to be government jobs. One from the OMB, one from she works for the FBI, but we're not going to talk about her FBI stuff as much as government job stuff. So out here in California, that would be more state and local. There isn't as much of the federal stuff, but there's a federal building in San Francisco, right? So they actually do really interesting stuff because they've got federal money behind them, right?
Yeah.
All right, we're over time. I'll see you guys all next week. I'll be here for that one on next Tuesday.
Great. See you guys hopefully on the 15th, okay?
See you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. These are recorded, right?
Yes, it will be recorded. And the link, yeah, I guess so. I mean, even with Steve pitch hitting, we can put this one up on the link too. In fact, it'll be a mea culpa and we'll put it out there. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.